Allora,
Thank you very much for participating in the event, and I'm back. We have to move on to Dr. Francesco Silvestri. Please come here. The environmental principle of the new programming period 21-27, Francesco Silvestri.
njemu predamo besedo. Sì, può stare qua o sul palco, l'importante è che è girato verso il pubblico in modo tale che anche le telecamere la possano inquadrare. Grazie.
Meglio tenerlo così. Bene, grazie. Io sono presente dal pomeriggio.
Here I am. Thank you very much. So I've been in this sector for many years, and I would like to tell you briefly how the environmental topics are part of the new programming period. Thank you.
Ecco, allora tra l'altro mi scuso appunto colpo al balzo il suggerimento del professor Piritelli prima che ci diceva
So, Professor Tiribelli said, let's use one language for simplification, and indeed I have prepared my slides in English. Anyway, this has been my work on the environmental topics, and I have we have cooperated a lot, the two sides, the Italian and the Slovenian. We cooperated with a Slovenian counterpart. He's much younger actually and nicer than myself, but anyway. This is the central topic of the new programming period. It's Italy and Slovenia. Within the next programming period.
Della paternità del prossimo programma, di quello imminente, quello che sta per essere avviato, è questo PO, sapete,
so at the heart of the next programming there is this PO, priority objective number 2. And the idea is to have a greener, low carbon transitioning towards a net zero carbon economy to reduce carbon emissions. The idea is to have a more resilient Europe by promoting renewable sources and fighting against climate change. This priority objective number 2 is then broken down into specific objectives, 0.4, 2.6, 2.7. We selected 3 for the environmental topic, so promoting climate change adaptation, all that we have been experiencing, including these days in Italy. All the problems relating to climate and climate disasters, extreme events that unfortunately are so frequent. So they are no longer emergent or exceptional events, but they are quite common. So the line, the specific objective of the new Interreg is specific objective 2.4 on promoting all the possible interventions to adapt to climate change. 2.6, promoting the transition to a circular and more efficient economy, so improving on circular economy, so the proper and correct use of waste management, waste recycling, so to produce as little as possible waste. And then specific objective 2.7 has to do with biodiversity, the protection and preservation of nature, the wildlife, we heard a lot about the geopark and the geosites that are technically not part of Natura 2000, but are nevertheless an environmental emergency in the sense of an element which is very relevant for the environment. These projects can fall under 2.7. And then there is another important topic, which is a specific objective, a different one, specific objective 4.6. It's enhancing the role of culture and sustainable tourism. So sustainable tourism, what can we do to make our tourism greener and greener? Reducing the impact of tourism in our area, cross-border area between Italy and Slovenia. Well, these topics are, by the way, it is my pleasure to take the floor now because this used to be Axis 3 in the previous programming period, and there was already a focus on these topics. A lot has been said about bees, sustainable agriculture, and other topics, all of which
molti scienziati ormai hanno già da 30-40 anni nella propria agenda.
All of which are present on the agenda of many scholars and experts. Now, the environment is, of course, top priority here for us and also for economists. And I think that the change is really about to take place. Anyway, this is the next, maybe in the next programming period, 28 to 35, we will have the change. The environment must be ever present in the political agenda of anything in Europe. Otherwise it will be the end and there will be no more policies. Anyway, the first message that I want to focus upon is the following. The majority of the European policies that we have ahead of us, also the cooperation between Italy and Slovenia, are centered around objectives and aspects that have to do with the environment. Another aspect that is present in the new program of cooperation between Italy and Slovenia is the Strategic Environmental Assessment, SEA. Take the European program, and the European Commission is inviting us to think, whenever we have a program, to think about the potential environmental impact. Of course, we can only think about it. We can imagine the possible impact on the environment and make an assessment of this. Before, you have to think about this before the problem takes place. This has been done, identifying and assessing the projects, the actions rather. We don't have projects as yet. So we perform the SEA, if we use the European terminology, Strategic Environmental Assessment, and we have adapted it to our actions, to our specific objectives, SO, those selected for our program. I'm sure you are all aware of them, and how these can have an impact, either negative or positive, on specific environmental aspects. So the topic are air, climate, water, soil and land use, biodiversity, landscape, and including the cultural landscape, which is fundamental in border areas, because we are very rich in culture, and the topic of population and human health. Well, the experts, including ourselves of the working group, by working with external experts, by working with the two delegations from Italy and Slovenia, we're attempting to imagine what could be the potential environmental aspects.
Questa è una semplice scala che viene anche proposta
This is a
da
simple
molti, dal monitoraggio
table
gas della Commissione
which
europea.
can be easily
Questo
found
dimostra
also
che
in
si
many
accende
works
una
published.
luce
Anyway,
non solo verde,
anytime
bisogna fare qualche cosa.
anytime the color is not green, then you have to do something. And if the light is red, -2, it means that that action must be completely rethought. If you get a red, it's not a good idea. Thinking about the previous slide, since there is great interest towards the environment, then it's nearly natural that the CEA ends up having a lot of green squares. The vast majority are green, luckily. And what we could conclude, we as experts, but also thanks to the help of external experts and thanks to the environmental authorities, so the ministry, the ministry in Slovenia and the two regional governments for environment in Veneto and Friuli. The conclusion where we got to, shared, validated by all the authorities, was that the environmental expected impacts of the program, of the Interreg program, predominantly positive. So these impacts are mainly positive. So the actions, as they are guided by the strategic objectives, most likely will have an impact on these environmental topics and will have a positive impact, luckily, with a few elements. Some other aspects need our attention, and we have to intervene with proposed mitigation or enhancement measures. So we have to mitigate or to improve. Mitigation measures were applied every time we found a -1. So -2 would imply a do it again, forget about it and do it again. If there's a -1, well, there can be elements during the implementations that will have to be taken into account with mitigation measures.
È aperta da un certo punto un po' una finestra sulla possibilità, ancorché è un progetto principalmente immateriale, cioè interventi soprattutto, ne abbiamo sentiti anche poco fa, di ricerca.
Now, the majority of the projects are based on research, cooperation, etc. So, but for instance, Objective 2.4, do something on the topic of climate change, climate emergency. Well, that would require the need for small infrastructure. It's a small infrastructure, okay, but it can be positive in the long run. But in terms of works, it can actually need a mitigation measure. And the other big topic where we have to be careful is tourism in general and sustainable tourism, keeping into account that tourism is either sustainable or we should forget about it. And as we know, tourism is fundamental in our life. Currently in Trieste, it has a major impact in Trieste, in our city, on biodiversity. And the idea is that when we will finally assess all the actions relating to tourism, have to take into account that there is no negative impact. This is the strategic assessment that we performed. We call it VINCA, an assessment of incidents. Anyway, this is anytime that you intervene on a place, on a site with specific environmental importance belonging to the Natura 2000 network. Now, even if it's an improvement, even if it is something that is done to improve, you nevertheless have to perform a specific assessment on that specific project. And I have learned that what in Italian is called Vinca, this type of assess, it's called Todatec in Slovenian. Anyway, DNSH. It's a new principle. You see that the European regulations 852/2020, there's a new principle. So the acronym do no significant harm. Do no significant harm. It means that you should do nothing that could possibly harm the environment. Now, if we read Regulation 852, it means that from programming period 21-27, all projects that are financed thanks to European money must guarantee ex ante that there will be no harm done to these specific environmental objectives, and there are 6. They are the same 6 of the Paris Agreement. So there are 2 on climate, mitigation and adaptation, then there's water, circular economy, the topic of pollution, and the biodiversity. So far we have been very lucky because we were working on the environmental assessment, taking into account the 6 objectives, environmental objectives, that figured on the previous table. And all in all, the things tend to coincide. So biodiversity or natural heritage tend to coincide. When we had climate, here it says mitigation and adaptation. Water is water. And all the others, pollution, circular economy, those are topics that were already, an environmental assessment cannot be serious without these points. Maybe we had broken them down differently. Pollution, one word in the DNSH, is covered by several points: air pollution, water pollution, soil and land use, population and human health. All of these can be traced to pollution. So we had to make an integration here and there and understand what corresponded to what. But here again, we have come up with a second assessment, a bit different from the first one, whereby these 6 specific objectives in the new program, are they compatible with regulation DNSH? Because unless they are 100% compatible, then we have to adapt, we have to explain, we have to give a couple of indications here and there and go for mitigation measures. And again, you can very clearly see on this table the same thing that I attempted to explain earlier with reference to the strategic environmental assessment. So there are specific objectives that correspond 100%, fully compatible with this DNSH principle, and others that are very close to the target but not fully yet. Why this small difference? We have to take into account the possibility that comes from the program. Maybe some of the applicants or beneficiaries will be able to make use of those. For instance, when they decide to work on measures that also involve small infrastructures, and then you have to go and see the mitigation measures. Not much, really. And 4.6, tourism again, sustainable tourism, which 80% will cause no harm or will not harm the climate, will not increase the emissions,
implicherà problemi sulle acque.
will do no harm to our water, but inevitably tourism does have a minor or not so minor impact on water quality. And also in this case we will need a couple of mitigation measures. This was the last point on DNSH, and I wanted to say a couple of things more because 2020, this is all new, brand new. Think that the circular letter for the implementation of this principle, so DNSH in Italy, is dated 30th of December 21, less than 1 year ago. These are all things that emerged work in progress over the past 1 year and a half, and this means that then something happened shortly after December 30, 2021. There was a big novelty, and if you work in the institutions, we had the reconstruction and resilience measures from Europe with all the measures, all the money, and you need a declaration on the NSH. Now, we hadn't specifically thought of the NSH for the applicants of the Italy-Slovenia program, but it is highly likely that the European Commission will request for this project also a DNSH declaration. Is it difficult? Is it very demanding? We have to read the circular letter of the end of the year. We received it from the Italian state. And they explain how to tackle the NSH. There are 29 activities applied to the reconstruction and resilience plan. Production of energy from renewable sources, reforestation, building of new buildings, works. These are all topics that we could find in the cooperation between Italy and Slovenia. This circular letter plus the operational instructions contain 29 files that help us to understand what does it mean to DNSH when you open up a new construction site. It means so and so, but it can certainly be helpful for the future, for those who will be responsible for projects and calls in the future. And then another state agency in Rome are about to prepare guidelines. Most likely they will coincide or they will clarify what is not clear. So we need not be afraid. So we have to be careful, we have to think about it, but tools are coming and they will help us how to respond to this new challenge.
This for the DNSH. And when one last slide, then one last night, and one last topic. The environmental agencies at local and central level within Slovenia provided two indications to the managing authority. On the one side, they said that while the project is being implemented, there has to be a monitoring activity of all actions, of all results with reference to environmental matters. So the monitoring system, which is quite agile, includes 4 indicators not to be applied to all projects. And for some projects, indeed, not all of them, the stakeholders will have to gather information on, for example, the number of tourists. There's an action for tourism enhancement of a certain site. We have to measure the carrying capacity for that site. We have to calculate how many tourists visited that site. We shouldn't be scared. This is quite a light system. And then, for this reason, for certain specific actions, for certain calls, there will be a series of environmental priorities for the applicants. Nothing to be scared of. It will be a supplementary score rather than an obstacle to the project implementation. But nevertheless, these priorities have to be taken into account. Sometimes it's just rules and regulations that I have to comply with. But for enhancement projects on the sites of the Natura 2000 network, their monitoring is absolutely mandatory. One of the agencies presiding over the national heritage reminded us that very often projects, especially infrastructures, have to be discontinued because there was no archaeological verification before the project itself. So let's do some preemptive archaeological assessment with all the departments involved, especially if there is the risk that infrastructures do impact on archaeological sites. So these are 4 indicators which have been trying to summarize the whole pattern of environmental aspects within the next programming period. Thank you.